Good afternoon and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Sarah Miller, SBAM's Vice President of Operations, and today I am joined by frequent co-host Kelli Saunders.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Sarah said, I'm Kelli Saunders, Vice President of Policy and Engagement, filling in for Brian today, who is on spring break, and we're hoping he is having a good time. But Sarah, do we have a new member to recognize today?
We do. We want to welcome one of our new premium members. They are Thrive Family Health Direct Primary Care. So thanks for joining. And if you're watching and you're not a member, we'd love to have you. In fact, we're running a little bit of a special promo this week, and maybe we'll talk about that at the end when we tie it into an event. But yeah, we'll talk more later. But we'd love to have you as one of our new members too. All right, so let's dive into the show. So, Kelli, we've talked a little bit about an appropriation that was passed in the House about a month or so ago. And now Speaker Hall is saying that a project at Selfridge is in trouble if we don't move. So, what's going on?
Yeah, I believe that Jacob actually went over that Speaker Hall had been at the Michigan Republican Party convention. At that time, they always like to interview leadership, the media, that is, when they get a hold of them. And Speaker Hall started to ring the alarm bells a little bit on a project at Selfridge. If you recall, there is a certain flight or fleet, I should say, that's being retired. And so there was a project that was essentially delegated by the president to replace that fleet in order to keep Selfridge whole. And so last week, Speaker Hall brought attention to an appropriation that was passed, as you said, about a month ago, in order to help get a runway built at Selfridge. And so, what Speaker Hall is saying is that if that appropriation is not taken up in the Senate, when they come back essentially by May, that he thinks in conversations that he's been having with the White House that that project could potentially fall through. And obviously, there are opponents of that are pushing back on it, saying that they're calling his bluff, that it doesn't have to happen that soon because there are other conversations being had between the governor's office and President Trump's administration, as well as the Selfridge Air Base itself. And so there is this little back and forth, as we've seen with this legislature and this governor, a little tit for tat on who wants to take credit for things and what is real and what is not. But we should take seriously, because of Speaker Hall's relationship with the president and his administration, that they are pushing to get this done. And so, as we said, March 3rd, the House did pass in a 65 to 41 vote a grant worth $152 million for that Macomb County Selfridge Air Base, and that the work on the base would potentially happen a year earlier in 2028 instead of 2029. And so the fleet essentially that is being retired is called the Warthog. And then what would be replaced are these Eagle fighter jets. They do name things really fun in the military. I'll just say that. But the main point is that we've just got some internal fighting that's happening here. Some people are saying, why hasn't this happened? They're all on spring break right now. And so the House has essentially been out by the end of this week for 3 weeks. The Senate will have been out for 2 weeks by the time they come back next week, Tuesday. And so we'll keep an eye on this story as it progresses. We know that Selfridge is incredibly important to our Southeast Michigan partners, specifically in Macomb County. Selfridge Air Base is actually home to a senator, Senator Kevin Hertel, who's in a very swing seat, if you will. This is an election year, and so they're trying to put pressure on him to move it. And we all know that sometimes during silly season, things are being pulled back and forth quite frequently. We'll hope that politics doesn't come into play specifically within this project, because it is important specifically to our defense industry in Southeast Michigan. And so we'll hope everybody does the right thing, come to a good conclusion to make sure that Selfridge is kept whole and that this new exciting project can come to Michigan and we can see these fighter jets be in place right here in Michigan.
And then we'll learn the new names of fighter
Yes,
jets.
it's
Yeah,
fun. I had to
Warthog,
throw it
right?
in.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let's switch to some workforce news. Pell Grants are on their way to Michigan. What are these grants and why does this matter?
Yeah, so if you recall, about 2 years ago, the governor actually talked about Pell Grants and how important they were to the workforce, and had highlighted even some special guests in her State of the State speech and how they can really change people's lives, not only to kind of upskill and get ahead, but also to offer it as another tool for workforce in order for employers to have the ability for employees to advance and obviously add to our talent pool, but just for a better way of life. And so we bring this up because workforce is one of our policy platforms here at SBAM. We're always interested and usually supportive of types of programs that can help not only our talent pool get stronger, but Pell Grants are an important piece of that. And so, starting in July, the federal government's Pell Grant program will expand to offer financial aid for short-term workforce aligned credential programs. And that is realizing a goal actually of many community colleges and policymakers that have been trying to get this in place to boost post-secondary credential holder numbers for a while now. So the operational workforce Pell Grants are commonly referred to as the Workforce Pell. And they were folded into the One Big Beautiful Bill Act when it passed in 2025. In July of 2026, implementation date was set, and giving states about a year to make necessary changes to ensure a smooth rollout. And so the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, who we work with closely often, and the Department of Lifelong Education Advancement and Potential, which is MyLeap, are in charge of working together to make sure that this program is up and running. Both departments that we work with quite closely. So the non-governmental partners that are involved in this is Michigan Works, again, a good partner of ours, and the Michigan Community College Association. And they have been involved in the process of how institutions can host workforce credential programs for the Pell expansion and making sure that prospective applicants are aware of this new option. We've worked with the Leo officials, and they have said that full implementation will require data system modifications and potential changes to training programs. Now, in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, there was not funding that was allocated for these changes. So the states have to take it on themselves and make these changes, which often does obviously require funding within departments. We know how tight the budget is, obviously, based on conversations happening with the legislature and the governor right now. But there is a commitment to making sure that this happens with funds that were within the departments themselves. So not all workforce training programs will be eligible for the Pell Grant coverage under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act provision. Programs must meet the expansion's eligibility requirements, and they must have offered their host institution for at least 1 year. And it must consist of 150 to 599 clock hours, which is spent in classes or under instructional supervision, as opposed to credit hours itself. It needs to be delivered over 8 to 15 weeks and must obtain certain performance benchmarks. One of the benchmarks having at least 70% completion rate and at least 70% job placement rate within 180 days of a student completing the program. This is actually really great to see. We like benchmarks, we like completion rates. We know that we've had struggles over the last couple decades really with people enrolling and not completing programs, and it could be based on numerous things. Maybe a life event has come up, maybe that the scheduling of the specific program or classes were not in a traditional setting. We need non-traditional office opportunities for people to engage in this. But that in this program, it is meant for non-traditional students. And so this benchmarking with the non-traditional is something that really we think is positive. And so it's good to see that the state is engaging in this type of opportunity for the workforce to have another option if they're looking to obviously have that support through the Pell Grants. And so look forward to this summer, us updating on this piece. It does also play into the governor's 60 by 30 plan, which we support. And so it's just nice to see more tools in the toolbox. And you'll probably start to see a lot more advertising, I would think, in a more robust campaign through the departments, but also just to employers specifically for their workforce to tap in and make sure we would continue to upskill our workforce.
Kelli, you just mentioned 60 by 30 and you referenced the MyLeap department. And there was some news out of that department on re-enrollment in college through the Reconnect program. So tell us a little bit more there too.
Yeah, so just a reminder, Governor Whitmer was really intent on her 60 by 30 program, which is 60% of the population having a credential or degree by 2030. Obviously, as her time as governor comes to an end, her foot is still on the gas in this space, which is great. And Sarah, you just mentioned the Reconnect program. One of the things that we had advocated for as a proponent of Reconnect is that you have to be able to study the data so we can see outcomes, that there are, like we just talked about, benchmarks created so that we know when we're giving money to certain programs that there is a good outcome to come with it. And so there was a new report from an organization focused on getting adults back into higher education. It's a partnership within Michigan, has led to nearly 14,000 people having re-enrolled to obtain degrees or certificates over the last several years. The group is called Re-Up Education. It highlighted how over the past 8 years, more than 13,900 individuals in Michigan who had stopped pursuing higher education have re-enrolled. Of those, more than 1,700 have graduated. It stated that about 25,000 more individuals are actively weighing enrolling at an institution or higher education. It was also added that the increased enrollment has led to an additional 57 million in tuition revenue for institutions across the state. It highlighted expanded partnership with the Michigan Association of State Universities and programs in partnership with MyLeap that we just talked about, and that it is advancing the 60 by 30 post-secondary attainment goal. Re-Up Education had its first partnership with a higher education institution in the state in 2018 and established a partnership with MASU in 2022 with six public universities. And so they're kind of think about it like a third party partner in order to study is Reconnect working. The report does state that there are 1.2 million Michigan residents who have earned college credits but do not hold a degree, and that about 38,000 students drop out every year. And Michigan does also face an estimated 20% decline in high school graduation by 2041. So, in order to continue to decrease barriers to education, one of the biggest things when they were surveying folks that were trying to decide, do I re-enroll? What made me drop out was the cost. And so we know that Reconnect is a great program to help people with that financial burden in order to get back into the system, gain that credential or that degree so that they can continue to pursue their career. And so we're just now starting to see kind of these stories and also the metrics to see if these programs are actually working like we thought they would. And I would say science would say that it is, but there's always room for improvement. And obviously, people always ask for more money in order to increase these metrics to get them to a good level. But the question is, where can we make the fine-tuned pivots that need to be made within the education system in order for people to have access and to be able to accelerate their learning at a pace that works for them and also makes the workforce stronger. So all these things work together. Pell Grants, the Reconnect program, making sure we're watching the benchmarking. It's all stuff that's headed in the right direction to make sure that Michigan's workforce is strong, but we have to get people interested and engaged.
All right, and we're going to continue on with the education policy news, and we're going to talk about literacy. So, Governor Whitmer made literacy one of the key pillars in her State of the State speech this year. And some primary work has been done through EPIC. So, what did that report from EPIC tell us here?
Yeah, we know that Governor Whitmer has made a pretty concerted effort on education during her time as governor, specifically in increasing per pupil allotment. And so in her State of the State this year, she did talk about the focus on literacy. We know that our student outcomes are not very good right now when it comes to across the country and where we fall. So, as part of the state's Read by Grade 3 law, lawmakers had approved funding for intermediate school district early literacy coaching, which is intended to strengthen, obviously, research aligned instruction in K through three classrooms. So in the 23-24 school year, the state invested, as a reminder, $42 million annually, supporting 362 coaching positions statewide. Using the data collected in 20 and 21, 21 and 22, and 22-23 school years, including 318 hours of observation in 89 classrooms, EPIC examined how literacy coaching was implemented in schools. And the report found that teachers who received literacy coaching demonstrated a greater instructional growth during the school year than the teachers who did not, which means that obviously this curriculum is working. Most of the coaching teachers received also focused like research aligned practices and high intensity coaching activities, including modeling lessons, classroom observations, and one-on-one conferencing with teachers. And then additionally, receiving that type of coaching mattered more in the total amount of time the coaching happened. There were also manageable caseloads, how much could be taken on, where they saw effectiveness versus ineffectiveness. And of course, drawing on upon the data, this report said that more funding is needed in order to um, provide more literacy coaches and getting them in schools. So this focus on literacy that the governor is making, it's clear in combination with some of the letters program that she had talked about, it does work. But what we know is, again, budgets are tight. And so as we move towards a budget, hopefully in June or July of this year to get that over the finish line, how are they able to essentially balance what they think they might need for education in order for those outcomes to be better versus what's actually feasible and available to put into education funding? We know that there's kind of been this uh, tiring of people saying that there's more money needed within classrooms. I think the question that's starting to be asked is, with the money that is going into classrooms, how is it being allocated in a way that's helping kids? Where is that money really going? And so I would say the debate will probably start to center on that. With how we've increased funding over the years, how can we maximize the funding that's already there in order for outcomes to be better? Not necessarily how much more money can we put into the per pupil allotment. And so we're going to start to see that discussion unfold over the next couple weeks as these budgets get ironed out. We know that the House was doing a lot of meeting on their budget targets prior to spring break. We know that the Senate's probably going to gear up after they come back. And so these are two different chambers that have two very different philosophies. And we have a governor who's focused her State of the State speech on literacy. And so, how do those three things come together? We're about to find out. One thing we know that the public is asking for, though, is to make sure that our kids have better outcomes. And so, how do we put that at the center of the conversation rather than fighting about dollars? It's about methods and making sure our kids are equipped. So, that's going to be a pretty interesting dialogue that we're going to watch over the next couple weeks. And again, we are in the middle of education funding too. We have a framework in our policy it's called Launch Michigan. And so we'll be watching this debate. We'll be bringing it to you as it unfolds. And we want to make sure that we're equipping kids to be successful when they move on, whether that's through a credentialing program, traditional 4-year, or just straight into the workforce to make sure they're equipped.
All right, well, thanks for that update, Kelly. Let's change topics. Let's talk about gas prices. Governor Whitmer issued an executive order on Friday about fuel. So can you tell us more about that?
Yes, as a commuter who comes back and forth from Grand Rapids to Lansing most days, it's an expensive endeavor lately. So yes, Governor Whitmer did issue an executive order last week declaring an energy emergency in the state amid rising fuel costs. The order eases requirements on certain fuel blends, allowing for the sale of higher vapor pressure gasoline, which the governor's office said is typically 10 to 20 cents cheaper. Specifically, the order suspends requirements for lower vapor pressure gasoline in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Washtenaw, Livingston, Monroe, St. Clair, and Lenawee counties, preventing formation in the summer months mainly. The order does bring the state in line actually with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, agencies move to temporarily waive vapor pressure requirements, allowing the production, distribution, and sale of different gasoline fuels. So if you saw that late in the day, obviously Easter weekend was upon us. The governor did issue that executive order. And so probably see a little bit of relief in some of those areas. For those of you who don't, I don't know if that'll trickle down or not, but we do know that has been higher over the last little bit here. And we'll just hope it comes down because I feel the pain myself.
Yes, spring break road trip last week. I
Yes.
definitely felt the pain as well, Kelly.
Well, I figured you did, but I thought I'd let you weigh in on your own.
I sure did. I sure did. All right, let's switch to some news out of Washington, D.C. The Michigan congressional delegation did ask President Trump for assistance after Southwest Michigan had those devastating tornadoes about a month ago. So, what's the latest there?
Yeah, so four members of Michigan's congressional delegation did band together to ask President Trump for a presidential disaster declaration for counties in Southwest Michigan that were hit by those string of tornadoes. In a Friday letter to President Trump, the lawmaker said they did support Governor Whitmer's Wednesday request for a disaster declaration. This is pretty common when we have extraordinary events like this. So, Whitmer said earlier in the week that a preliminary damage assessment, which is required in order to ask for that presidential disaster declaration, was done on March 17th, and through which state officials determined that the damage met the threshold for seeking federal assistance. And signing that letter was U.S. Senator Gary Peters, as well as U.S. Senator Alyssa Slotkin, Congressman Bill Huizenga, and Congressman Tim Walberg. And so, as this is pretty standard that these steps have to be taken in order for federal funding to be unlocked, much like what we just witnessed with federal assistance in northern Michigan for the ice storms that happened, obviously, over a year ago. That was a little bit different of a scenario because we were appealing a denial. This one is more in real time. And I think, given all the struggles that Michigan has had with weather over the last year, and also because of Congressman Huizenga and Congressman Walberg's close relationship with the president, that this will probably be looked at in a much more quicker fashion in order to make sure that those local and county officials can have the proper supports needed in order for those communities to start to rebuild and have infrastructure put in place to make sure that the citizens there have access to normal functions again. So we'll keep you updated as things come down the pipe on that front, but it's not always normal for a letter to be issued very publicly. And I think for those four folks serving in Washington, D.C. and covering obviously those communities, it was important to make sure that they knew that they were being represented in a very vocal way to get those resources there. So, Sarah, that's all the news that I have for today, but we have talked about it before and we're going to talk about it until we can't talk about it anymore. Michigan celebrates small business. So we made an exciting announcement today. Do you want to talk about the extension?
I do. I do. So, as you all have heard us talk about, as Kelly mentioned, Michigan Celebrates Small Business is a 2-day extravaganza. It's coming up April 21st and 22nd. It is 4 events over 2 days. And we extended the deadline to register after consulting with our fellow advisory committee members. So, you now have until this Friday, April 10th, to make your plans to attend. So, I just dropped the link in here on Zoom and on Facebook. But you're not going to want to miss this. I'm sure you guys talked to, well, I don't know the timing. I don't think we talked about the pitch competition finalists yet on this show because we just announced those last week.
I don't think we did
So,
either.
yeah, I think it happened midweek. This is what happens when you take a little vacation. But we have 5 amazing small business owners who will be competing live during our summit on April 21st for the chance to win $10,000. And those of you in the room get to help decide who how the outcome goes. We also have 18 different breakout sessions scheduled, an amazing lunch happening, lots of time to network. And then, of course, we have a VIP reception. Our Capital Day is sold out, I believe, Kelly.
It
Yes, Capital Day is sold
is.
out. but there's plenty of room at the gala as well. So visit the website, take a look, make a plan to attend. And if you aren't a member, this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. If you're not a member and you'd like to become a member, we have some special ticket offers this week. You can reach out to Kelli or me or our membership team, and we'll get you to the right direction. Membership at sbam.org, or sbam at sbam.org, and we'll let you know more about that. But we would really love to have you there, get a chance to see Kelli, me, Brian, Jacob, and the rest of the team in person, and do some connection. So we hope that you have a great week, and we will be back here next Monday at 3 o'clock.
Everybody have a great week.